So, welcome everybody from the Brain Gym community. It's my great pleasure to introduce Gillian to you today, who is going to present on the Brain Gym cross crawl, the fundamental part of our Brain Gym. And she has had so much experience, so she will present Brain Gym cross crawl through the ages. Gillian, over to you.
Thank you, Dorothea, and thank you everybody for joining. So this presentation pretty much is about me sharing my journey in Brain Gym, and I know I'm amongst amazing colleagues who've been involved just as long as I have. The reason why I'm doing this is because it will then make sense to the amount of research that's on Breakthroughs International as well as the Australian Brain Gym website. And then so people can, in the future, understand the history behind where it came from. So at the end, we'll have time for questions. I promise you we won't go over the hour, and it's not my normal style of presentations. I'm far more with participants being active, but with this way, I need to actually share a bit about the information of the research. So the actual presentation is from 1986, when I first came into cross crawl, to what I'm doing currently. So before I start, what I do is like to acknowledge the work we all do on the various lands that we're beaming from today. And I know without a doubt that all of you have devoted your life ever since you were introduced to Brain Gym and Touch for Health and kinesiology, that you've been like me on this journey. And it's not just about helping Aboriginal Torres Strait Island people, but it's inclusive of all other cultures, and especially regarding, for me, is around children and their families, because that's really, yes, I've done a lot of work with adults, but really that's where my focus. So acknowledging everybody's resistance and resilience to get to where we are today. And I'd like to honour any Aboriginal colleagues that are here today, and thank you for joining this session. So, of course, classic brain gymmers, let's just do a bit of pace. So do what you need to do. I'm going to be quiet for a minute as you go through it. So while you can still be in hook up, and I always say the mantra that I use in education is we're willing, ready, and able to learn. I just love that statement, and I use it as often as I can. Okay, so through this presentation, I'm going to talk about how I assess, or how we call noticing. So what I'd like you to do is to, and because we're such a small group, what number, if you're 10, if you're just jumping out of your skin because you've been to Kings Park and done a Nordic session of skiing, you're probably feeling pretty good. So if we could just shout out, if I say to Dora, so for me, I would say I'm an 8 at the moment. So Dorothea, what are you? And if you could choose someone after.
Most likely 8 too. Yeah.
Helen?
Oh, about a 7.
Okay, Kate? 8. Julie? Julie, what number are you?
I said 7.
Oh, sorry, didn't hear. Thank you. Thank you. So that I always in my work, always do noticing. and this is something that I use when I'm doing a PowerPoint, and this PowerPoint will be available on the Brain Gym website. So this is one I always use. So the end of this will make sense. So at the moment, what I do in the education space is I talk about bilateral movements, because I've really been muffled to say anything around, you know, kinesiology, brain gym. And so this is exactly what I do when I am presenting this under as a brain break, this currently in my work. So I use this slide, and you're very welcome to use these. And as you can see, it's not very clear, but you've got down here understanding behaviour, delivery support, student support, and specialist programs. So this is in state PL, this slide, which is pretty amazing. But I don't say, I just call, because we have OTs in our group. So we have allied health as part of our behaviour specialists team, and they talk about bilateral movements. So that's where it is. So what I do is I'll invite you to stand up again, please.
Sorry, Gillian, I have a problem with my legs. I can't stand.
Oh, thanks, Helen. All right, you just do what you need to do. So just be aware, like as you're sitting down, like just notice which side. Okay, so we're going to stand on one leg with your eyes open, just noticing. Stand on your other leg. Okay, noticing. Back to your original leg. Eyes shut. Back to the other leg, eyes closed. So that's the noticing activity. Then I get them, right? So classic, as we know, let's do some just simple cross crawl. And I say to them, do it as slowly as you can. And then I say, okay, you've got a puppet. You imagine that you're puppet. So you're actually bringing your hand up and down. And I make sure I really hear. Make sure you're engaging your shoulder. Going back. So I have it all on the one slide. And then I say you always finish with a bilateral movement. Okay, and then we recheck, obviously. So let's go back to our original one leg. Other leg. First leg, eyes closed. Other leg, eyes closed. Okay, so was it good for you? Neutral, or I'm never doing it again. If you can show me, indicate. You say, was that good for you? Was it neutral, or I'm never doing it again? If you can show me. So I'm always seeking for feedback, always making sure. So that's what is being used in state PL in New South Wales. But so we'll sort of finish on that note as we go through into the presentation. So let's recheck. So I would say I'm a 9 now. Dorothea?
Yes, 9. Yes.
Helen?
I'll say I'm an 8. I've certainly
Beautiful.
come up. Yep.
Okay, Kate?
Did you?
You're on mute, Kate.
7, surprisingly, but I noticed my static balance was quite off with my eyes closed, which is not unusual.
Okay, and Gilly?
Yeah, well, I'm still at a 7, but doing this again, balancing with my eyes closed at the moment on one leg is not a good option for me.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So that's what I normally do when I'm presenting in PL around. I always, and people get sick of me and they say, oh, you know, I'm a bilateral movement nut. So we keep doing it over and over.
May I ask what's PL?
Oh, professional learning.
Thank you.
Good work. Thank you, Kate. Anytime like that, pull me up, because, you know, acronym is very common in the department. All right. So I was born in 1960 and didn't crawl as a baby. So, but I didn't know that. My mum never told me that. I didn't find out until I was in my late 20s. And if you look at my report here, I actually was also very unwell in year 1 for a number of months, and so I missed a lot of school. And as you can see, if you miss out on those basic skills in the beginning, it's really hard to catch up. So it was really evident in my early years that things weren't great. And then that continued like in year 6. There was still very obviously that I didn't really have the skills that I had or needed to be successful in my learning. And then it continued right throughout high school. I really struggled, and then actually failed in 1978, my first year of HSC, which is our year 12. And then when I repeated, as you can see from those marks, I only just got over the line. So learning was always an effort for me. And then thought, well, I'm going to become a teacher. And lucky back in those days, it was not only on marks, but it was also on your interview. And luckily, and then I went to teachers' colleges and graduated in 1982. Unfortunately, I couldn't help people such as, Daniel and John and Ruby and all those kids that had very similar learning patterns to myself, or learning differences. So I actually gave up teaching in 1984, and thought, well, I'm going to travel the world and just see what I thought I'd always wanted to be a teacher, and that wasn't going to be it. And then in 1986, I was living in Los Angeles, discovered kinesiology, went to a kinesiologist, but did not know that down the road was Paul Dennison. I never heard of it. The gentleman never said that to me. And then continued traveling for another couple of years in some very remote places such as Africa. I spent 7 months in Africa, and because during that time, not much medical care. And so it started already implementing kinesiology exercises and, techniques that were really powerful in the middle of nowhere. So when I returned to Australia in 1988, was lucky that the first, one of the Edu-K for Kids courses were happening, and then went on and really, was inspired. But at my first course, they got, because I was a beautiful reader, so who wants to do something about their reading? Because I didn't have any comprehension, of course, because of the lack of the contralateral movements in my whole system. So I put my hand up, went out, read this beautiful passage, and then they said, well, tell me about what you read. And it was like, I ain't got a clue. And then they did repatterning. It was with Michael Wilde in back then. And my first integrated thought, then I reread and beautifully read, and then they said, what's this passage about? And I went, blah, 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 and went, wow. At 28 years old, my first integrated movement was, this stuff is really, really powerful, and this belongs in education, and hence where we are today.
Wow.
So
amazing.
When I first moved, so I sort of did all my training in Melbourne, and then couldn't go back to my original school because I said, look, I've discovered this really interesting sort of system of helping kids learn. And they said, well, you've got to have everything in triplet, and you've got to do this and you've got to do that. And I was like, well, I don't know. I know it works powerfully one-to-one, but I'm not sure that I can stand up there and say, as a group, with a group of people, that I can make a difference. So I thought, well, I'll go into an alternative system. So I actually worked in an independent school in New South Wales. I moved from Victoria in 1989. Worked at an independent school for a year and had a year 3 to year 6, and the changes in those kids were phenomenal. So I thought, right, I can make a difference in a group. But at that time in New South Wales, there's the amount of little blockers that I've had. At that time in New South Wales, it came upon that you couldn't use integrated movements, like accelerated movements, not movements, but the accelerated learning system. And so there was sort of a bit of a block on the whole of the department system. And so I couldn't get myself into any local schools. So I thought, right, well, I'm going to work with people with special needs. So hence I did lots of different groups around the area in lots of the local towns and had amazing results. And I got a lot of media coverage. And one of the things that I learned back at that time, and this is where the visual feedback, and there's a slide or a template that you can use, because after every session, the young people would always do me a drawing. And then this is a young person. So number one was a young girl, Aboriginal, probably at the time 24. And this is after working with them for about 2 years, really. So this is 2 years. The number two young person was a young man at the age of 26. He had cerebral palsy and very awkward gait. And so used to fall over and hurt himself all the time. And this is where I started. So how it developed, usually by an accident, is like all their pictures I used to put together for their Christmas present and make a book so that they could then have it under the Christmas tree or whatever. And as I was starting to put these books together, I could see the pattern, like that primitive, you know, here on the complete left, that primitive sort of unintegrated, really base brain, sort of really cellular picture. And then after a while, I could see their pictures were developing, that as they could cross crawl better, as they had ability to access more part of their body, you could see a change in their pictures, and then you could actually see them starting to come into their bodies where they're drawing limbs and facial features and whatever. So that really triggered my interest in the visual feedback. This one is a student that I worked with. So as I was working with groups of people, I was working as a kinesiologist with a lot of young kids in the area. This young boy was 12 years old. He could not read, and of course was very shamed at school, being in year 6. And as you can see, it actually goes, the first one, you know, on the left, and then if you go down below with this one, you see the image coming of whatever that believes, and then that turns into sort of an animal up here on the right hand side. And then this boy I'd worked with for about a year, and then you could actually see, and unfortunately this young man was dealing with a lot in his personal home life, and the red certainly symbolised this, but it seemed to be the wound that he was carrying was more than just a big blob at the beginning. So I use a lot of artwork. It gives me a lot of information. So after I started working with, now can you still see all the text, or your pictures aren't in front of the text?
I can't read it.
Unfortunately, the little window is also covering the text, but I will try to move the window away so that...
If I do that?
Yeah. If I put it down here. Yeah.
Can you see that, Julie, or is that too small?
Oh, it's just too small for me.
All right. I'm sorry, but you might, yeah, I can't really enlarge it.
No.
That's okay. That's okay. Don't
All
worry
right.
about it.
So due to the success of me working with the people with disabilities and with one-to-one, I was fortunate. One of the principals gave, you know, I was quite good friends with her, and she said, look, why don't you start coming in and doing the program within my school? And that was in the year 2000. And a very good friend of mine was an OT. And this is the first bit of research, and it's actually on our Brain Gym website. And what it was that obviously the kids, you know, these were kinder kids. There was 10 of them, and the OT's report after he, you know, we spent a term working on with the young students. The OT's report was that, and if you can read, the Educational Kinesia Program Framework provides a holistic approach to motor development. The results of this pilot study require further investigation to evaluation the potential and benefits of a kinesiology program within the school setting. The scores of Tommy reflect improvements in motor skills functioning as a result of the Edu-K program. In kindergarten, even once a week program can make a difference. So the research was, that was a very rigorous piece of research that actually started to, so the lower the Tommy, if you look over here, the lower the score, no significant problems. So the higher, so in the black column was obviously the first part of the program, the study, and each of those students pretty much had a significant drop. So what I use with kids about assessment and reporting and noticing is I get them to draw what I'd like to. With the little ones, it's just draw me. With the older kids, there's draw a person, house and tree. And if you look on the internet, that's an actual proper assessment that you, like, apparently you've got to be a psychologist to properly implement it, but it's still available. It's just called draw a person, house and tree. So I get kids to, setting a goal and, what they notice. So these are some examples for some students. This was a young girl who was pretty much non-verbal, that she arrived in kindergarten in the year 2000. This is in March. Again, there's that patterning, like there's complete chaos, really no forms. The more that the students did the exercises and did the program, and this is at the end, this is in April. So there's actually a formation of a young person. And the other one, of course, we use a lot in Brain Gym as a noticing technique, getting kids to write. And this is a young boy called Ben. He was also in kindergarten, and just that 1 month, the difference of how his writing had changed is just some samples. Wow. The effect on mental health, short term. This is a young person, Aboriginal, the typical profile of a lot of dysfunction, trauma. And you can see, so this was her first attempt, and this is the same day. So you can see there's a lot of really sad things happening in this young girl's life. And this girl was 8. And then at the end of the session, the difference, like that she can, yes, the wounds are still there. You can see the management of the lines, but, she feels like she's got a bit of a blue light around her, which is, to me, knowing what she was dealing with day to day was pretty special. Long term, this is an example of a young boy that I'd worked with for, like you can see that's in May 2000, and that's at the end of December in 2001. He was a young boy that was had a lot of, very capably cognitively wise, but just struggled with social cues and social issues, and that's how he felt at the end of year 6 before he went to high school, and pretty special picture, really. So what I was lucky in 2002 to be awarded the Teaching Through Movement program, and at that time the Australian did a really big story on me around, because of the success, because a lot of the schools that I was working in actually were getting better results in NAPLAN. And all this is on that journal article is on the Brain Gym website. And interesting, another piece of work around the research is I was working with a group of young students in year 6 that were going to high school, and this school wanted me, they created this special class because these year 6 kids who were only a couple of terms out from going to year 7 were not coping, and so they were really concerned. So this is about repatterning. Now, this is not an official case study, as in I haven't written it up, but I've got all the evidence. It was interesting. I think there was 13 students in this class. And then at the end of it, it was, as you can see over on my hat, so you could see the date. And then what did I do? Did I repattern? Did I use centering? I was using muscle testing within the school gates, which was pretty amazing. And what was really phenomenal is when the teacher wrote her report, that the kids that I'd repatterned, not any of the others, a happier disposition in some class members has been evident. And when I cross-referenced the kids on my log of what I did per week, the kids that I'd done the repatterning with, that the body allowed me to, were the ones that actually were written that the teacher had noticed. So repatterning is very, again, the cross crawl sort of was like, started to sort of jump out at me. Another example of this boy was carrying a lot of trauma, and he couldn't sleep, and he wanted to shoot everybody. He was in about year 4, this young little fellow, very sad, very angry, and all his drawings were full of, you know, guns and ammunition. And it was interesting, as you can see the date from the 16th to the 10th, so it was only a couple of months, to a couple of months later, you can see the basket symbol, you know, but, you know, at least he's got a good wizard. And was there someone asking me a question?
Yeah, may I ask what the basket symbol means for you? I do not understand.
Well, see how the basket symbol's on his head? Like, we can't read into it. Like, I just say, okay, well, that head, you know, to me, that basket, whatever he was carrying in his head, at least he's carrying it, but it's not weighing him down. Yes, it's a bit like, you know, how we can't take our wounds away. We can only learn to live with them. And he was a big gamer, this young boy. So, and he was one of these young students that I was working with in this class. And this was after the repatterning with him.
I think it's interesting he's holding a bottle. Is that because you make him have water before he crosses?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That was a big
thing. It's working.
Yeah. Drink water. Drink water.
Yes.
So, you know, the symbols, you know, I'm not a art therapist, but the difference between that picture of wanting to kill everybody and the eyeballs and the downwards, you know, like he has a wand. It's not a gun.
Yeah, and look at his smile.
And look at his smile.
Smile. Yeah. Yeah, I did Bandhouse tree pictures with kids for 30 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
Absolutely.
So where did it end up? This is on the back of that article, you know, again, that picture of before and after this young person. So I used to call myself Move to Learn, and I used to go around to lots of different schools, and I had every one of these characters. So the red was I move, orange was I feel, yellow is I see, green is I hear, blue is I relax, and purple is I put it all together. So every one of those characters had a game. The schools would buy the kit, and in that was a series of games. How the program worked was I would go to a school, different schools on different days, and I would do a program of 6 sessions with the teacher and the classroom and their class. They would come and I'd do 6 sessions, and then they would be a series of activities, and of course the purple was the brain gym activities, and it was phenomenal. The results, literacy wise, you know, some of the schools were getting incredible NAPLAN results. You can't say it was just the program, but it certainly was interesting. But sadly, most of these schools could only use their funding for 5 years. It was an innovative programs, and because it was in their 6th year, they weren't allowed to employ me. So all these principals signed an affidavit that they wanted me to stay within the school system because there were suspension rates and all these things were happening. And what happened was they then got, the minister, someone who'd presented me that award for, you know, the international award, they gave it to me on Australia Day around here. And so that minister who said to me, anytime anything happens, like, get in touch with me. So I got in touch with him and said, look, they're shutting me down. That, you know, even I've got all these principals who want me. what can you do? And he went to the education minister, and the next minute I got a letter saying, and all the schools got a letter saying, do not employ Gillian Morrison at all. So pretty much my work was terminated within a couple of weeks, even though it was successful. So
I feel for you. I feel for you. That is just terrible.
It's all right, Dorothy. We all deal with it. All right. So before I talk about the adolescent, are you okay for me to keep going, or you feel like you need to do a bit of a movement? Because I've been talking a lot.
Yeah, right with me.
No, I'm sitting here moving in my seat anyway.
Okay, beautiful.
Please continue.
All right. So what happened was, luckily, my husband was becoming a policeman, and so we were moving to Sydney anyway. And so I thought, well, I can't start again in Sydney. No one knows me. I'll just go back and be a teacher. And then, because I thought, well, I can't beat them outside the system. I've tried that and they've shut me down. And then, so I thought, well, when I move to Sydney, I'll use my married name. So Gillian Morrison no longer existed. I talked about Gillian Stuart, so there was no connection. And then was fortunate enough to gain a position in an adolescent tutorial centre in Western Sydney in Penrith. Now, it was an ED-BD setting, which is for emotional disturbances, behaviour disorders. So most of these kids were all Aboriginal. All dads were in jail. There wasn't a dad. They were in kinship care, out-of-home care, living on the streets. There was kids I'd have to try and find a refuge for them every day. And so I actually took on, in 2005, I arrived there and spent quite a few years there. And if you look over here on the left, at the time in 2009, out of the 100, the kids, 90 odd kids that were that came to the school, none of them could cross crawl. I just need to take a drink. So what I decided, what the first thing I introduced was food, and it's all written up, and I'll show you later on. So I don't really want to talk about what I did at the behaviour school, because you can read about it in your own time. But what I want to point out is that the attendance rates, after introducing food and exercise, it was just incredible, the changes that I had in the kids. So this is the time I wrote my master's, and that's available on the Brain Gym website. And I did, my master's was the intervention of Brain Gym on, reducing challenging behaviours with at-risk youth. So from here, you can see this is the pre and post intervention. So the kids, how it worked is the kids used to come to school, they used to get fed. And this is the time when ICE was first coming onto the streets, so we didn't really know what was going on. So I'd be out watching these kids arrive with these silly gaits and thinking, my goodness, what's going on? So what we used to do is, once they got fed, then we did the daily physical exercise program. So like I did before, just the pre-activity of standing on one leg. Then we'd go, each student had to go around the circle. We had little circles because you couldn't have a lot of the kids together. There was only 21 kids and 5 teachers because of the ratio. I mean, these kids were at the bottom of their educational journey, we had kids going in and out of juvenile justice at the same time. They were all on bail restrictions. They all were committing crimes in the community. So they were, really weren't in a well state. And then each kid would do an exercise, and then whoever the teacher was, or me, we would do a brain gym exercise. So I sort of upskilled the teachers. And then I did, is there a change? What did you notice? So there was other things that we did at the school, of course, but, you can read about this. I just want to keep it around the cross crawl. So that's where I wrote this research. And through my research, in kinesiology, they have a encyclopedia called Walther, where they have all the muscles. And it was in that I saw a reference to George Goodhart's work. And I think all of us online are very familiar with George Goodhart because he was John Thee in the beginning, you know, in Touch for Health land. But George Goodhart was a chiropractor. And there's an article that I found in the Walther that I actually secured, and he called anything homolateral was called a schizophrenic pattern.
Wow.
So he said every young person or every person that he ever tested who had a homolateral pattern, actually, he said, went on to have mental health issues. So it's quite an amazing piece of research that I sort of pegged my hat on. There was also George Goodhart, and on the Breakthrough International, there's just a summary of the research, and I mentioned Goodhart's work, who was a brain gym person in USA, amazing guy that I was lucky to be able to speak with, and he sent me this research, and his research pretty much, he tested 3,400 people, or, you know, an incredible group to actually assess. And out of that 3,000 or so, 1,000 and so on, you know, 400 were absolutely fine. But all the homolateral people ended up in, you know, care, juvenile justice, you know, like homelessness. So the work of Goodhart and the work of Eyestone is pretty much what I hung my hat on, and you can read about that further. I did that, was the principal of, I was at the Behaviour School for 5.5 years before I went into corporate. That was my first corporate gig. But before I left the Behaviour School, like, you know, I had 95% attendance. You know, I had kids getting their year 10. And I couldn't really understand why no one was ever interested what was going on with the, you know, with the school. Other behaviour schools were getting me to come and present what I was doing, but I had to be very careful because I had to sort of stay under the radar because I didn't want to be shut down again. And then on the website, so after I left there, when I was in corporate, they said that you have to, after so many years in corporate, you've got to then go back to a school. And because I'd relinquished my position at the Behaviour School, I was thinking I haven't got the mettle to really be going way out west. So I thought, well, I'll become a principal, because I thought, well, let's see how I can make a difference within a primary school using cross crawl and on brain gym, etc. And that's all pretty much written up in that chapter that is on the webpage. The thing about while I was at the public school, and I really haven't got it here, was we you know, from 2012, before you know, the NAPLAN results were certainly significant after my arrival in 2012. And we went from below state average to state average. So how did I do it at the primary school? And if I invite you to stand up, because I'm normally not such a talker, if you can.
Yes.
So this, I called it Ready to Learn. So every morning we used to get the kids out to do cross country and lots of different activities. But so the message was drinking water. So let's have a drink. And the other thing that I really introduced was the headrest. So let's just hold our heads. And I used to talk to them about the drum beats. Can you feel a drum beat in your head? And is the drum beat on one side, or is the drum beat on the other side? And I said it needs to be nice. And is it fast? Is it slow? And I used to say, we want it to just beat slowly together. And just take a nice big breath. And then I always said, okay, but now I'm going to make sure you're aware that you're going to take your hands away, taking your hands away. And then we do, obviously, just the basics. So I used to say now, looking at the basketball court on the left, looking at the swings on the right, looking at the basket. So, getting them, swapping hands. Okay, rubbing your lips, looking up. So looking at the sky, how many birds can you see? Okay, looking down, how many ants can you see? Is there any critters on the ground? Looking up and looking down, swapping hands, looking up, looking down. Okay, and then rubbing right at the back here. We all know this one. Okay, all right. What's the furthest things that you can see? What's the furthest thing that you can see? Okay, what's the closest thing you can see? Furthest and close. Okay, swapping hands. Furthest. What can you see? Can you see the sky? Can you see the plane? And nice and close. What can you see? Can you see your eyebrows? Can you see your ears? Okay, rubbing the ears. So you're unpeeling them. What can you hear? What's the furthest thing you can hear? What's the closest thing you can hear? And then kids used to love this course, so we'd make a sound. Woo, woo. So do with me. Woo, woo, woo. And then let's cross crawl. Let's always get calm that nervous system, I'd say. Calm that nervous system. And let's hum. Can hear you. All right, let's go nice and slow like a puppet. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and all right, and let's bring it home. Let's always finish with a cross crawl and humming and looking everywhere. Okay, shake it out. So to the staff, I used to speak about learning. Everything's about learning, not about the work. It's, so if kids are finding it an effort, or if it's fine, easy, that's how and this pretty much taken from the repatterning. So I just put it, I'm not quite sure. I think I put this together. I can't remember if I've seen it. I'm happy to be wrong, but I think I put this to try and sort of make it sort of accessible for the teachers to understand and to get them to actually look at where we are with learning. Okay, I'm here. All right. So now currently as a behaviour specialist advisor, and I have a very big, takes me 5 hours to get from one end of my area to the bottom. I'm encouraging my team to talk about bilateral movements and the OTs. I say, look, we've got lots of OTs in our team, and they talk about bilateral movements. And so you know how it fits in. brain breaks. This is straight off the DET website, Department of Education and Training in New South Wales. And this is what they say brain breaks do. And there's a link down there where this information is taken from. So that's where it belongs right at the moment. I don't say brain gym, I talk about brain breaks. That's it. So I'm going to stop sharing and wonder if any of you got any questions.
Yes.
Gilly.
My first question is that last thing you said with the brain breaks. Have you checked out the websites for any other education departments to see if they have similar things?
Not really.
Because it'd be just interesting to see. I think they probably do have. It would probably be useful information for brain gym instructors in general to know that and to publicise that.
Yeah, well, maybe that's something I can follow up, Gilly, and have a...
Yeah.
That's a good question. I look, the theme in the department or in schools, and we all know, is trauma-informed practice. So all of us come, everybody has some sort of trauma in their life, but unfortunately there's some young people and people who have incredible amount of trauma. So they're saying that movement, the work of Bessel van der Kolk, the best work of Bruce Lipton, Joe Dispenza, like they speak about how movement can support people living in their rib cage or living in their body. So instead of like that boy who's completely, carrying that heaviness of that basket, that wound or those wounds, he's still got that wound. You never get rid of the wound. You learn to live with the wound. So that's pretty much like it. We've come a long way, and now in our group we've got allied health people, so we've got OTs, we've got speechies, we've got psychologists, so but really it's under trauma-informed practice that movement, rhythm helps calm the nervous system. And even there was a presentation I saw the other day, they were talking about polyvagus in the wellbeing space. So that's pretty exciting, really. What are you showing there, Kate? I can't see it. Do you want to unmute and share? Beautiful.
Gilly introduced me to this. It's called Our Polyvagal World by the two Porges, the father and son. Brilliant stuff. It's amazing. I recommend it highly. Gilly, what have you got to say about it, please?
Well, the thing about that book is it's written, Stephen Porges' son is a journalist and documentary maker. And so they've written the book to put it in simple, everyday language that everyone can understand. So it gives you the language to talk about it to parents, to teachers who've never heard of it, and all that sort of thing.
Right.
It's really worth the read. It's incredibly accessible. And I have found myself in this book.
Fantastic. Anyone else?
Yeah, may I ask to Kate, put it in the chat, the title and the author, so that we could find the book? That would be great.
I'm awful at this sort of thing, but I'll have a go.
Thank you. I've had a number of talks on the polyvagal system, and every time I went home and was so confused and I couldn't really fit it into my world and my understanding of it. And so I've yet to learn a lot about the polyvagal system.
Can I add just one thing? The thing that really blew me away, and this is belly breathing and all the breathing techniques, between the parasympathetic or the relaxing nervous system and the sympathetic, the only thing that we have control over within that range is breath.
Yeah.
we breathe whether we want to. Our body breathes for us no matter what, but we can actually use our breath to make a difference to how our body's reading things. And that's a knockout. I've got a couple of talks I'm giving, and the more I read this, the more I think.
I was just going to say this should be your next presentation for us.
Maybe yes, maybe no. And
I've already booked that. I'm looking at doing something on the polyvagal system because I've been reading about it for years now.
You do it.
And the brain gym balance process, because they are so interlinked, and it is such a great way of looking at the whole process. So that's one of my main projects at the moment.
Oh, can't wait. It's brilliant stuff. Anyway, enough.
Gillian.
Yes.
I'm looking at the time and I want, if I may, as I'm hosting the call, I wanted to thank you from the bottom of our heart. This was so interesting. I had no idea about all those achievements, and I'm now going to the website. I'll be looking up those uploaded things and read up on it. That is fantastic stuff, and I am so grateful, and I thank you so much. I would now stop the recording, and if we have more questions and answers, perhaps we can do that afterwards. But as for now, if that's all right, would you like to say some final words and then I stop the recording?
Look, all I want to say is, like, we're all in this together and we've just got to keep on going. You know, like, we know how powerful it is, and I know we're getting blocked, and I know how each heart, you know, how much we keep going, but in our hearts and hearts, we've just got to, you know, I'll keep going till the moment I'm still upright on this earth, because, you know, and every time I seem to get close, something seems to shut. But, you know, like, you know, I just know how powerful it is, and I'm inspired by, you know, Jillie's one of my instructors, you know, I'm on the committee with you, Dorothea. Kate and I have been around together. Helen, we connected in Sydney, you know, Helen's work. Shelley, I'm not quite sure. I haven't met you. Would you like?
Hi, what a beautiful presentation, and thank you so much. What an incredible journey. I'm just so blessed.
Well, we're in it together. We've got one world. So it'll be available on the website, this PowerPoint. And look, you know, you can find me on the Brain Gym website. I'm happy to support whatever, you know, but I want to thank you, because it's only us that I can be. You're only as good as your team. So thank you.
Yeah.